Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Discuss. I am so excited once again coming to you. Today we are recording. It is a blustery, snowy day here in the greater Kansas City area. Who knows where you are or what day you're listening? Maybe it's next week. Maybe you're in Texas and it's bright and sunny. Who knows? But I'm looking at the snow right now. Today I am elated to have with me Dr. Hughes. She is a board certified pediatrician, an international board certified lactation consultant, and as well a mother of three. She's the founder and lead physician of Bloom Pediatrics and Lactation. She's also Kansas City's only breastfeeding medicine physician. She started her practice as a way to provide quality, convenient, and accessible care to the children of Kansas City. She lives here in the Kansas City metro with her husband, Jordan, and her son, Calvin, and her twins, Nolan and Sloan. And I'm so excited. Welcome, Dr. Hughes.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
Hello. So I always ask the podcast, I ask people how we know each other, but when I stop somebody on Instagram and ask them to come on my podcast, I save them the moment of embarrassing me of being like, well, you randomly slid into my DM. So that's how we know each other, because I was like, who is this magical creature? Can we be friends? Yes. So
I love it.
It's such a pleasure to have you on. I'm so excited. What a random snow day that made it that we were able to record a little earlier even.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I know. We were just sharing. Again, it's so funny that people who are in like California or like my girlfriend in Germany who's listening, and they're going to be like, it is not snowing. Will you guys stop talking about snow? And I'm going to be like, no, because actually I was mentioning to you a minute ago, it was snowing this morning, but like I've never had problems. I have a nice SUV with these weather tires and a snow setting, and took the kids to school so I could do my therapy sessions. My husband works from home downstairs. We're all good. And I went to go get my son's snowboard waxed so that we could I had to do a little snowboarding in the backyard after school, and got stuck in the street. So right now and it's funny because I was like, oh, it'll be so great. And I'll go donate blood. I took a little extra iron supplement this morning. I'm like, because school's canceled over at the University of Kansas where I teach. So I'm like, this is going to be great. Totally stuck in the middle of my street. So as it stands right now, we will have resolution to this before this podcast drops. But as it stands right now for our conversation, I don't know how I'm going to get my kids this afternoon. So
Oh no.
The joys of parenthood and living in the Midwest.
I guess I hope you have like skis, like cross country skis, maybe.
I have a snowboard, which I don't think will help me very much, but also my 2.5, that's what I was thinking. I was like, well, if I leave now, I mean, we could walk. It's not that far. It's a few miles. And I was like, I can't walk in the snow with a 2.5-year-old and an 8-month-old anyway. So that's not an option. So they usually scrape we live in a neighborhood and they usually plow. So I'm hoping that the snow stops and the plow comes, and
it has to eventually stop.
Yeah.
It has to.
Yeah. They're well tended at school at least, but yeah. So anyway, so pardon my detour there before we even jump in, but I know that you can relate also to the massive snow drifts in your backyard. And
yeah, I had to cancel my clinic because I was like, well, this just looks ominous.
Yes. Well, I was like, oh, they get those roads plowed. They're so good about it. I understand canceling KU. I was disappointed though, because I got my PowerPoints all done and I was so ready to teach my little session today. But I understand, I appreciate the kids getting, well, they're not kids, they're adults, they're in a master's program, but I appreciate them getting the day off. So I'm not mad about it, but I was also like, oh, that's a disappointment. I was really looking forward to it. And then I was like, but I'll run out and I'll donate blood and I'll go get the board wax and and it's like, oh no, I should have kept the kids home and canceled my sessions today too. Okay. Lesson for next time. Oh my goodness. Well, already off on a tangent. I will bring it back. So I would love to know, tell me a little bit about how you got into medicine. How did you decide how you wanted to specialize? Tell me a little bit more about that.
So if you want to go all the way back, I knew I was going to be a doctor when I was like 6.
Excellent.
My dad is a family doc in our small town. And so I grew up with very small town medicine. Like people would just come over to our house if they didn't feel well.
Oh,
I helped him put stitches for the first time on our kitchen table when I was like 6 or 7 years old. Anytime my brother, I have 3 older brothers, and anytime they got hurt, I was always like, okay, everyone sit down and wash
yes.
the wound, and I dress it. And my dad like started letting me give everyone their flu shots and like all this stuff. So I knew
Amazing.
this is what I was going to do. I never had a really any other desire to be anything else. So I went through college, and I knew that I was going to go to med school. I went to KU Med after college, and in med school, your 3rd and 4th year, you do rotations in different specialties, so you can kind of figure out like what you want to do. And I realized that I kept being drawn to kids when I was on my OB, and I would be elbow deep getting a placenta out and like trying to watch the baby. And
Oh,
I wanted to know what was going on over there.
yeah.
And it was, I was like, oh, I don't want that. I like,
Yes.
and I did, my family medicine rotation. It was like, well, I didn't want to, like, yeah, adults are fine. But like anytime a kid came in, I would just get so excited. And I was like, oh, okay, no, this is like pediatrics is what I want to do.
Yes.
So I did, I decided I wanted to go to KU Peds. It was a small program, very family oriented. I knew I was going to have children. So it was kind of a no brainer for me. As far as the lactation consultant side of things, when I had my oldest, which was 6 weeks before I started residency,
Well, I'm so sorry. Moment for that, please. You had a 6-week-old baby when you started your residency.
Yeah.
Girlfriend. Okay.
Yeah, it was
Ooh.
yeah, and I started like on an inpatient rotation. It was busy. So when I had him, we really struggled with breastfeeding. I feel like that is not uncommon for first time moms. I didn't know what I was doing, and he wasn't gaining weight. And then I found out he had a tongue tie, and it took until he was about 6 weeks old for us to finally get it revised. And then he was able to latch and take on, and like his weight took off, and we were able to nurse till I got pregnant with my twins. But that whole experience really shaped that. I was like, man, I don't know much about breastfeeding. And I joined this Facebook group called Dr. Milk, which is a physician group for breastfeeding parents. And so it stands for Doctor Mothers Interested in Lactation Knowledge.
Nice.
And it was a wealth of information, like not only like, oh, I need latch help and like my supply dip, things like that, but it was like the biomechanics and physiology of nursing, and like getting into the microbiology of breast milk, and like understanding, like breaking it down to a cellular level, and like recognizing like all of the benefits and the parts of it, and like how to adjust things to make it more comfortable and to allow children to receive breast milk if that's what their parents want, and like all of this stuff. And so it was just so fascinating to me to read about this and realize like, man, this is really interesting. And then as I became a pediatrician, our postpartum care leaves something to be desired for mothers. And you see your pediatrician a lot postpartum. And so the pediatrician is usually who breastfeeding issues are brought up to. And I am very much a fixer. And I don't like to delegate. I like to do things myself. And so when people would come in and they would say, oh, I'm having XYZ problem, it was frustrating to me that I couldn't just be like, okay, let's do this. So I'd be like, okay, I'll go see if our lactation consultant is available. And if they're not, well, I know you're 3 days postpartum and you're in a diaper and you're bleeding, but like, I need you to come back tomorrow because she doesn't have availability, even though it was just,
right.
It didn't make sense to me.
Sure.
So I studied and took all the courses that I needed. I had my 90 hours of education, my 1,000 hours of hands-on, and I took the test my second 29 yes second year of residency, and got IBCLC certified, and then I was able to actually start helping and learning. And then I also spent time in my residency going and rotating with other breastfeeding medicine doctors. I spent time with Dr. Kathy Leeper in Omaha, who she is like one of the leaders of breastfeeding medicine. And she's been doing it since 2002. And then I also spent time in Portland, Oregon with Dr. Bobby Gahiri, who is an ENT and one of like the leading researchers in tongue tie. And so I was able to get like some pretty good hands-on education and bring it to my practice.
That is so fantastic. And you're right, it's interesting. You do think about those moments of reflecting back and being at the pediatrician's office and be everything that you just described being postpartum, because I mean, it's that literally that first week. It's like that baby is fresh out the womb.
Yeah. 2 to 5 days. 2 to 5 days is our new
right. And
and
yeah, and that's so great to be able to just one-stop shop and be like, I have this question, I have this answer, I have this question, I have that answer too.
Yes.
Instead of having to be like, let me go grab this person, let me go grab that person. So that's really, really wonderful. And it's so great too, because I talk about this a lot about, you know, making sure that people understand about the impact. Obviously, people are able to be like, your body goes through a lot of changes when you are pregnant and when you give birth, but then even the hormonal impact, the emotional issues that arise, the mental, the changing of your identity of being one person to being a mother and or a parent or whatever you want to identify. And it's so important to have somebody in that space who is able to be empathetic and understanding and not, because I feel like a lot of people's experience is just kind of like, here, take this Edinburgh test, and then I'm going to take it out of the room, and then no one's ever going to address it with you, but I'm going to check off the box that I gave it to you.
That I gave it to you, and I'm going to bill you for it. But like, unless you're a 13 or higher, I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
And, you know, maybe I'm not going to like read between the lines and you mark that everything's great, but like, you're telling me that you are weighing your baby 12 times a day.
Right.
And you're, you know, that you couldn't leave your room because this was a personal thing. I couldn't leave my baby's room because I thought I would impale his head walking by the dresser. That's postpartum anxiety.
Yes.
And you don't, it gets missed or glossed over or ignored, or here's a handout and you figure it out. And it's like, how can I how do I make this initiative? When you're so deep in it, it's just.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting. I've had this conversation so many times very recently, is that we're lucky to be in a space where there's a lot more awareness. We're decreasing stigma and talking about pregnancy loss, about it's not all sunshine and rainbows being pregnant, and especially postpartum. I feel like people know what postpartum depression is these days. Yes. I feel like then postpartum anxiety, I don't think people really understand what that is. And it's like, yes, generally people have more like little a anxieties because they're caring for a tiny human, of course, but there's that different level and that different component, and people are just kind of like, oh, you weigh your baby 12 times a day, you can stop doing that, you don't need to, they're fine. And it's like,
why are you doing that?
But like, yes, but why is that happening? And
why is that happening?
Yeah. And so you just telling me that I don't have to weigh my baby 12 times a day, thank you for at least saying that. But there's so much more to it. And I think it's what's so nice that we have people who are able to take a step back, look at the bigger picture, maybe ask some more questions. I think that's a big thing that we talk about, especially in that class that I'm teaching over at KU, is for substance use. And a lot of times when I'm like, and then what did you ask? And they're like, well, I didn't ask anymore. And I'm like, well, then how do you know how long they've been using, or when the age that they started, or what dose that, you know? And they're like, I didn't think to ask any other things, which obviously that's about substance use and not about perinatal health. But it's getting in that space where we feel like we're comfortable to ask more questions. And then of course too, it's okay not to know. So if you don't know the answer to what to do with that 15 on the Edinburgh, like go take it to somebody, please. Yeah.
And you should. And it is a hard thing to learn, and it's a hard thing to to ask. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable of like, are you, I ask every single, are you thinking about hurting yourself? You thinking about hurting your baby? Because unless you are directly asked, a lot of people aren't going to just be forthcoming.
Well, because
And
we have this society, like we're supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to be together.
we're supposed to
Pinterest
love our baby,
moms.
and we're supposed to love, oh my gosh, we've had this perfect blessing, and like you're supposed to enjoy every minute, and
Yes.
and if you
Yes.
don't, there's something wrong with you.
Well, absolutely. I can't tell you how many people, so I'll give a personal example. Just my daughter turned 8 months this past week, and I took a picture of her on my breast friend pillow, not a sponsor of the podcast, and but just the back of her head. And I was like, she's 8 months old, which means she officially made it longer than my 7 month, or my son, who made it to 7 months and then kept sitting up and being like, what's going on? So we had to move to pumping and bottle feeding because he wanted to sit and look around while he ate. He just couldn't do it. And people just were like, enjoy the moment. And I'm like, was that not clear that I am enjoying the moment and that I'm grateful that she's made it to 8 months? And so it is that space where it's like, well, you've just had this baby. You should be the happiest person in the world. People can't have babies, and you should love this baby. And it's like, I just want to make it really normalized for some people that it's like, if you had some sort of unexpected situation or trauma in your pregnancy, in getting pregnant, in giving birth, and you don't feel attached to that baby, there is so much stigma around that as like, well, surely you love your baby. And it's like, maybe I don't love my baby right now. Like, is that I'm a terrible human being? And I'm like, and it's like, no. Is your goal to love your baby? Then we will talk about that. Now, if your goal is to ditch your baby in a trash can somewhere, let's have a different conversation. And see that, but that's not what we're talking about here. And it's just, again, I just get so jazzed when I see people who are like, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's have an open and intelligent conversation about that. Yeah.
And I think it does take a lot of practice, and like, you have to be okay with being uncomfortable and talking about difficult things. And that doesn't always come naturally to people. And I was very fortunate that was something that was really instilled in us in residency, was like, you have to be okay asking uncomfortable questions. You're not pushing someone into something because you ask them about it. And it's, you have to ask, you have to talk.
Right.
So it was very valuable. And I think probably one of the biggest parts of my practice, because I've been able to catch postpartum anxiety, and people, they're like, no, I don't have postpartum anxiety.
No, of course not. What are you talking about?
No, I'm fine. I just never sleep. I just stare at my kid because what if they die? And it's like, no. And so I've been able to, like, that's one of my favorite parts of my practice, is that I've been able to identify and help and prevent it from getting to a really bad spot.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I feel like it's a struggle for people to feel like they have the right to take up space in a lot of areas of life. I think in the doctor's office is probably one of the biggest ones. Like, okay, I have this whole list of questions, but I'm only going to ask 2 because I don't want to take up too much space. I don't want to be too intrusive. I don't want to be a bother or annoying, or is that a dumb question? And it's like, well, you're going to somebody who's trained in something to be able to help you with things that you're not supposed to know because you didn't go to medical school and you didn't do these things. And so that is definitely a very helpful piece when you've got somebody who you're able to say, like, no, I'm going to ask these questions, and this is your time. This is your space. Let's move forward with that. Yeah.
An analogy I use a lot, because a lot of my parents are like, well, I don't want to burden someone with my problems. And that is the most common thing I hear, or, well, I don't have it as bad as someone else, so like, I don't need therapy. And so my analogy is always like, do you not take ibuprofen if your back hurts because someone else's back might hurt more?
Oh,
like,
I'm writing that down.
Like, come on. And they're like,
no. Dr. Hughes, you have blown my mind. It is officially blown. Okay. I love a nice metaphor. I love a nice simile. Yes. I love a nice, like, way to get somebody to
rethink about it.
And that's so smart, because that's the thing. So a lot of times anytime I've been on somebody else's podcast or been talking to people, they're like, well, what is it? What are the signs that somebody needs perinatal therapy, mental health therapy? And I'm like, well, do you think you might need it? Then you probably need it. Like, you don't have to check all the boxes in the DSM and the ICD-10 to say like, I deserve to be taken care of. Have you thought about possibly wanting to talk to somebody? Do it.
Yeah.
That's it. Would you not take ibuprofen because somebody else's back hurts more? That is genius. That is genius. I'm stealing that. I'm going to give you credit, but I'm using it.
It's convinced several people. I had one mom whose response was, "Oh, logic, my kryptonite."
Writing that down too. I love it. Oh, I love it. Yeah. I mean, but it's so true. And I just, I know we're all over here trying to constantly dismantle the system, reframe stigma, encourage people to take up space, and it's just a little piece at a time. And I think we're making some great strides, and we've got a long way to go. But it is it's those little moments of the kryptonite that is logic. I love that too. Of like, it's okay. It's okay to take up space. Just because there are people who had worse experiences, your experience is so valid and real.
Yeah.
To you, let's talk about it. Let's deal with that. Let's work on it. Yeah. Amazing. Oh my gosh. Amazing. For those of you who are listening on the podcast, I feel like my face is going to split open from my smile right now. Like this just makes me so happy. What a great moment. Yeah. So then I also wanted to talk to you. So I was on Postpartum Support International. We have a little therapists monthly group, and they mentioned, I'm sad that I missed it, that you had been one of our speakers, and they talked about science milk. And I would love for you to share a little more, to say more about that.
So this was also someone in my DM. So I always want to, I put like, I want to make it like IBCLC asterisk. That's like, I don't care how you feed your kid.
Yeah.
And one of the things that like, I tell people, I'm like, I hate the phrase fed is best, because it implies there's another option. And there is not. Fed is only. There is only, if fed is it. You have to feed your baby.
Yes.
And I feel like we are all inundated with breast is best, and like breast milk makes your kid, they're able to jump a roof or something.
Future Olympians.
That's of course. And it's like, yes, we know it is the best, but what's more important is the mental health of the parents. And if it is sacrificing your mental health to provide breast milk to your child, then the benefit is not there. And so I always am like, yes, I'm an IBCLC. Yes, I think breast milk is a fantastic nutritional source for your child, but so is formula. Formula is fine. Formula has saved countless children's lives. And so going back to the science milk, someone in my DMs had messaged that she was like, we did everything we could to provide breast milk. I just didn't produce. And so we gave him science milk. And I was like,
what a moment.
That's good. Because I was like, yeah, I mean, it was milk created by science, has kept this child alive, has kept this family sane. This kid apparently is growing and thriving and doing beautiful because of science milk.
Right.
And so whenever like this conversation, so I love a good analogy, whenever this conversation comes up, and because sometimes you just don't make enough milk. Sometimes you don't. You have a hormonal issue, you have an anatomical issue, there's something else going on, you just can't make it. And so a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. And I'm like, and so I equate it to diabetes. And I'm like, if your pancreas didn't produce insulin, would you guilt yourself about needing insulin? No,
right.
Because it's not your breasts are an organ, your pancreas is an organ.
Right.
It's not your choice. This is not something you did. It just happens. And that's when science milk comes to the rescue. Like, you can think of it as a medication, if that feels better, that if your kid was a diabetic and needed insulin, would you not give it to him?
Absolutely.
Like, no, they need this food because fed is only.
I love that.
They have to be fed. So yes, that is the origin of science milk, was someone in my DMs.
What did you do? See, I tell you, those DMs, they do it for you.
I thought that was the most fascinating thing. I was like, that is brilliant.
It's so true, because, well, you see so many things that are best, and like back is best is one of those things that, like, you can correct me because you're a medical doctor. Are there babies that are not born with a back? I don't think that exists. So certainly there are limb differences. So putting a baby on their back, I guess maybe in the NICU and stuff, some babies are on their stomachs, but like if you're in charge of the baby's sleep, then back is best is accurate, right? That's like a global thing. We're putting the baby to sleep on their back. That's kind of an understood, like, but then we talk about like all these other things that are opinions, like breast is best. And it's like, and this Montessori is best. And this, and it's like,
this car seat is best. And it's like, well, they all have to meet the same safety standards. Like,
right. And so it's so difficult. I feel like we're just so inundated with things that are maybe portrayed as possibly being evidence-based, or maybe not even touted as evidence-based, but just best. That word best, I think, is so much.
Best is, I think, the trigger word for a lot of people, because it implies that you are doing something inferior for your child. That if you are not breastfeeding, you don't love your baby as much, you're not as bonded with your baby, you aren't wanting to give them the best.
Yes.
And I think it implies that I am a superior parent because I breastfeed. Or I provide my baby breast milk, and you are inferior because you do not. And I think that is where, and I mean, it's the age of social media and mommy shaming, that it's like, you can, I mean, you do anything and you're incorrect in someone's eyes. And so, but I do think that the breast is best thing, I think, started with good intentions of like, because we did have, and in the 80s and 90s, we had high amounts of like formula, like fine, like money, like paying hospitals and stuff to push their product. And like, yes, like that was inappropriate.
Yes.
But I think we like swung way too far. And like, you need to just like, we just need to be like, hey, cool. How do you want to feed your kid? Awesome.
Right.
Done.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I love the way that you put that, of like, it is such a triggering word of like again, like the Pinterest mom world. I feel bad for Pinterest because like it's a useful tool. So but I feel like now we've kind of co-opted it of like, don't be a Pinterest mom.
Don't be a Pinterest mom.
Judge. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so, but it is that of like the things that you want to do, the things that you have these goals. And then if that doesn't come, then being able to not, to be able to be a parent in a non-judgmental way in today's world is a very difficult way, because you do constantly feel external judgment, and then to be able to get through in a way where you're not judging yourself and feeling like a failure. And it is a very difficult road to traverse, for sure. Absolutely. So I love that. I love the science milk. I love fed as only. Like, yes, guys, but as opposed to
kid, you have to,
as opposed to
yes. What's your other choice? Best in respect to what? Like not feeding them? No.
Yes. Yeah. And I was curious too about kind of like what your thoughts were about, you already kind of touched on it, and I wanted to maybe talk a little bit more about kind of the mental health of the person who is pumping or trying to breastfeed, like that work, home, life balance that goes with that. And just maybe we're preaching to the choir at this point, but just a discussion on like when it's okay to say like, this isn't going to work for me because of this, or, I've known people who have older kids and they're like, I can't have this baby physically attached to me all the time and then take care of these other children, or, whatever it might be. But kind of your encouragements to people about work, pumping, breastfeeding, childcare, family, social life.
Yeah.
How do we balance all of that?
Yeah. So usually my first question is, what's your priority? Like, what is the most important thing to you? Is the most important thing providing breast milk? Is the most important thing that your work isn't interrupted? The most important thing that you're providing equal attention to your other kids? What is your priority? And then we just make the goal directed towards that priority, and then it can shift. Maybe it's that I always, if like their priority is to breastfeed and they have older kids and they have a demanding job, I say like, let's not do a big, like, oh, we're going to breastfeed 18 months. We're going to breastfeed a week. And we're going to make small attainable goals. And like, so it's just, we adjust and make those goals. So as far as like, if and when you want to stop, My rule is in one of the two people involved wants to stop, which is the breastfeeding parent and the baby. Those are the only two people who get an opinion.
Yes.
When one of them wants to stop, it's done.
Okay.
And I have had people where mom wanted to be done before baby, and that caused a lot of emotional distress. So we talked about like ways that we could slowly make a positive thing of like, one of my favorites is whenever kids are older, they love phones and timers. They love it. So like setting a timer for nursing and making it a big positive thing when the timer goes off, like, yay, we're done nursing, and slowly bringing it down to like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 3 seconds. So it is not a big, like where you're all of a sudden done. Or if I'm like, do you want to be all of a sudden done? Then yep, we can do that. We can put Band-Aids on nipples. We can do that sort of thing. Or then I've also had on the other side where mom's not ready to be done, but baby is. And it creates this big mental anguish for mom because she's like trying to force and they feel rejected. And so it is a lot of like, just reassuring that like your baby still loves you.
Yes.
They don't do anything that is personal. They don't have that ability.
Okay, but and that's actually a good thing to keep in mind for a lot of things, because sometimes it's like, you hate me, don't you? Did you do that on purpose?
Yeah, like, oh, you bit me, you must like, no, like nothing they do is like
malicious,
malice. Yes, yes, malicious. Yes, like they don't have that capability.
Yes.
And so it's figuring out like where the issue is, and then like, oh, if it's I can't have this baby attached to me. Okay, could you pump? And if depending on the kid's age, they could bottle feed, and then they can be included. So it just, my answer is it depends. There's too many factors, and it just depends on each family's priority on what is most important.
I just want to always come back to that, because everything, I know it's so oversaid, or maybe it seems obvious, but like, it's such an individual choice, the choice to be a parent and the ability to make that decision. And then of course we talk about decision fatigue, which I could go on a different tangent about that, but all of your choices have to be based on what works the best for you. I do appreciate when somebody's like, hey, I really liked this swaddle. If you wanted to maybe try it, but my baby's not sleeping. So I tried this swaddle, or my baby won't food. Well, I tried these spoons and they worked really well, but it needs to be like take the information, do with what you can. Cause I found some amazing products as a result of people giving me their opinions, their advice, their suggestions. And I also sometimes find it hard to ignore the ones that it's like, oh, but everybody says I need to be doing this, or I should, there's that word that we hate as therapists, be doing that. And it's figuring out a way to get to a space where you can say like, I'm going to do the best that I can as a human for my children, for my child.
Yep.
And what works for everybody else, maybe not work for other people, or what is not going to work for me. And that's okay.
Yep.
And it's just, I think we struggle to give ourselves that permission. So I guess maybe you and I are giving people permission. We're going to start right here, folks. You heard it here first. No.
I do a lot of permission. I do a lot of permission. I have explicitly told people just this week, I give you permission to, if your baby, like this one mom that anytime her kid made a sound, she got up and nursed. She's like, I'm up every 45 minutes. And I was like, they might even be asleep. And like if they're just going, they might still be asleep. And she was like, so it's okay to not just jump up. Yes. So I said, I give you permission to continue sleeping. And then I had another mom that she hates pumping. It's like, you know what? I give you permission to stop.
Yeah.
Like, be done.
Yes.
So permission is real common. And another thing I do is whenever people vent to me, because I said it is impossible for me not to start trying to fix. And it has been a big learning curve for me that I'm like, do you want solutions or do you just want me to listen?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And so sleep is probably the most common thing people complain about. And so I have learned to step back and say you might just be annoyed because you had a bad night's sleep and you just need to tell me about it, and that's fine. And you don't want me to start well, you could do this, and what are naps like? And I try. Yes. So that has been, I think, another big thing is yes, giving advice when you need it, but also being okay not giving your advice.
Yes, I encourage lots of people that often it's unless somebody specifically asks you, if I could, I sent a couple pictures to people about my current snow situation, which I'm looking outside. It looks like it stopped snowing. So maybe that's a good sign. Maybe I can go get my kids. Not right now, obviously. We're talking, but I don't know where you are. But
Where you are, it is still blizzarding here.
Well, maybe it's coming into the clouds. Hopefully, are coming your way too.
Maybe. Okay.
But yeah, and it's like, well, have you done this and have you done that and have you done this and have you done that? And it's like, guys, I was not asking for suggestions on how to get out of. My husband and I have been looking. We tried a bunch of different things. I'm a pretty decent driver. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
That I don't know how to drive my car in the snow. It's that there are 6 inches of snow and I don't have 4-wheel. Anyway, we don't even talk about my car, but like, sometimes I just want to be like, guys, look how dumb I am. I thought I could go get my kid's snowboard waxed in the middle of a blizzard.
Yeah. And like, sometimes you just want to say something.
But yeah.
With no feedback.
Yeah. I think people, and because people want to help, which I love that. I don't want to like come for people who are trying to be helpful. Like, oh, I'm really stressed for you. Let me give you advice. We really struggle in this world to sit with tension. We struggle with actually my last, one of my last podcasts was about the struggle of paradox and like, yes, and multiple things can be difficult, can be true. And that can be difficult to sit with that tension. And so we do want to fix, and that is kind of for those people who are caring for the carers, the parents, is like, maybe just straight up ask, do you just want to sit and whine? Or do you want me to give you some advice? Like, I will sit here. Let me get you some wine for your wine. Like, it's a real wine, you know?
I use my mom for that. I call her and I'm like, I don't need help. I just need to vent for a minute.
I need somebody else to be like, yes,
that sucks.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, it really is like, I don't need to be mansplained or momsplained or whatever splained. I just want somebody to tell me how much that sucks. That's all I'm looking for. Yes. So,
I just need validation that what I feel is fine.
Yes, which is tough because I actually was listening to a Brene Brown podcast, and she really encourages us to look internally for permission for those things, which we're not there yet as society, right? Which is why you and I were talking about, like, I do the same thing in my practice where like people would be like, do you think that's okay? And I'm like, is that what you think would be best for you? Well, yeah. I'm like, yeah, great. Let's do that. Let's give that a try and see how it goes. Like, you know, so what we're supposed to be trying to like look internally and be like, it's okay to feel this way. I don't need anybody else to tell me that, but we're not there yet. That's fine. We're practicing and we're getting there. So
we're getting there. And I always give, whenever people, like parents come to me and they're upset, you know, I feel guilty because I got mad at my baby for waking up overnight. I'm like, so my 2 phrases I always use is like, anything you say to your kid between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. does not count.
Doesn't count. Love it.
And the fact I have flipped off all of my kids.
Sure.
I've not to their faces.
Sure.
But I have been annoyed with all of them, and I am still a good mom. Yeah. I could not wait for nap time today, and I'm still a really good mom.
Yes.
It's that's the thing that you can, yes, I can be annoyed with my kids and still love the shit out of them.
Amen. That is one thing that my husband and I talk about a lot, is like, somebody sent me a meme and it was like, people who don't have kids don't realize how long the time between 6:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. is. Like, and I was like, that is so true, because you're like, I missed you so much all day, and then you've been home since 5:30, and from 5:30 to 6:30 we've been playing or having fun, and we're cooking dinner, we're all gonna sit down, and then it's kind of like, oh my gosh, somebody take these babies and put them to sleep so I can just sit down and relax again. And it's like, and then immediately you miss them and you're like staring at them in the monitor and like, oh, look how cute they are when they sleep with their little tush up in the air. And it's like, all of
it's the biggest dichotomy of emotions.
It is, and it's so okay. And it's like, yeah, I still love my kids very much, and they are very well tended.
I cannot wait for them to wake up, but I could not wait for them to go to sleep either.
Yes. I mean, I think if I could just really validate and normalize anybody who might still be considering whether or not they think that, I knew there was going to be a blizzard, and I still took my kids to school today because I was like, I want to work. My husband wants to work. And I was like, my car will be able to get there. And we did. We got there. It was perfectly fine. I didn't have one lick of trouble. Could have been perfectly sunny day, the same as I drove in today. And now I don't know how I'm going to get my kids, but I did it because I'm like, I want to work. I want to have some space between me and my kids. And that's okay. And we'll find them, and I will give everybody an update on the podcast page. I'm sure people are like, Okay, but Meg, literally, where are your children?
But they've got, they'll sleeping bag and get a thing of chocolate milk and be fine.
Yeah, but worst case, Austin and I will walk over and we will stay the night at the daycare. I don't know. We'll figure something out. It'll be fine. It'll all be fine. Yes. Anyway, well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, you sharing your intellectual and emotional labor with us today. What a treat. I hope you'll allow me to slide back in those DMs another time. Maybe we can have a round 2.
Perfect.
So please let the team know where they can find you.
So I run Bloom Pediatrics and Lactation. Bloom DPC is my website, my Instagram, my Facebook. I have a Twitter. I don't tweet. So DPC is in direct primary care. Yeah.
Great. Amazing. So I also have a Twitter and it is dismal. I have like 85 followers. God bless the 85 though. But so I was going to let you go, but I would love if you could maybe explain because what you do is so fabulous and amazing. I was actually describing it to my husband, Austin, earlier today, and he was like, oh, so is that something you want to do? And I was like, babe, I love that you think that I just have all the degrees and all the licensure and can do all the things. I was like, I'm not a medical doctor. I know you know this, but I just want to remind you that that's not my goal. So no, I was just telling you what my podcast guest for today is going to do. So I think what you do is the bee's knees, the cat's pajamas. Could you explain to people what is different about your practice? Because I just think it's so wonderful.
Would love to. So kind of going back to, it's slowing down now. Kind of going back to what we talked about with that 2-day postpartum visit. So the biggest thing about my practice that makes me different than most practices is I don't bill insurance. My patients pay a monthly fee like Netflix, but what they get is for my newborns, I do all in-home care for the first month. So whenever you are in that postpartum period and you're still in a diaper yourself,
yes,
you don't have to leave your bed.
Delicious.
I come to you.
Yes.
So I do a 2 to 5 day newborn check. And then I also do a 2-week weight check in everyone's home regardless. And then any other visits until the 1-month well check are all in your home. I also have some people that pay and have all of their care in their home forever and ever. My visits are hour and a half because I do talk a lot.
Me never. What? I do not feel attacked.
My patients text me 24/7. I am always available to them. And I'm the only I'm the only person in my office. So instead of I'm going to call and I'm going to talk to a front desk person who's going to transfer me to the nurse who's going to leave a message for my doctor who's going to call me back in 72 hours. And by then my kid is no longer ill or they've been sick enough that they've gone to urgent care already. My patients just text me directly. So they hey, we have this rash. Hey, we're coughing and I think we are having an asthma exacerbation. Hey, we've got blah, blah, blah. Yes. So I'm able to manage all of that stuff and keep it from getting to the ER point. I also, as far as how the rest of it works, it's similar to any other pediatric office. I send prescriptions electronically, you can order labs, images, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I just appreciate you sharing that a little more because I mean, what a true blessing to be able to be I'm freaking out about this tiny human I'm responsible for keeping alive. And I, believe it or not, do not have a medical degree. Help.
Yes. It is a lot of that. It's oh God, is this normal?
Yes. I got to tell you, I promise I will let you go, but you were talking about that mom and the every noise. And we reflected on that because our son stayed in a bassinet next to our bed for 3 months. Our daughter came straight from the hospital and was like, what is this? I'm not sleeping in that. I have my own room. I can see it. Put me there. So totally different children. But with our son, our firstborn, of course, too, every time he made a noise. So my husband picked him up, took him into the room, changed him. I got the boobs out. I got the pillow out. We're ready. He brings him to me. I feed him. My husband falls back asleep. I finish feeding him. I give the baby back. He wraps him up in the ollie swaddle, puts him in the thing, and we all go back to bed. Every single time he made a noise. And it was funny because we were talking about that. We're reflecting back on that, maybe we could just let him sit still for a minute, seeing how that went.
They're really loud sleepers. And a lot of times they're still asleep and then we wake them up.
Correct. Yes. So yeah, anyway, just wanted to send some validation to that mother out there. And I was Yes, and then with this one, so we're like, oh, we're gonna wait 10 minutes. She's still talking? No? Okay, go back to sleep.
Yeah. Good night. And I'm always like, if you can fall back asleep to it, they're not mad enough to need anything.
Oh, I like that. I like that very
You
much.
will wake up if they're
Yeah,
mad
they'll let you
and they
know.
need something. Infants are not subtle.
That's true. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. That's genius. Yes. Well, I promise to let you go now, but I do appreciate you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us and to listen to Dr. Hughes. And as I have recently coined my new catchphrase, as Ted said, Walt said, be curious, not judgmental. Everyone have a great day.